Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. I'm super excited to introduce you to Everything Beautiful, which is from the new Celebrate release from Honeybee and is also one of my illustrations. So this is a super fun kind of like swag bouquet of tulips and Peruvian lilies. And then you could see there's kind of some extras. And those are some of the same flowers that are in the bouquet. So you could use them to stamp and die cut and pop them on top just to create more dimension, or you could use them to stamp and die cut and tuck them behind to make your bouquet a little bit fuller. So that's just kind of a, a fun little add-on to the full floral. We are going to be doing today 3 cards using not only the same stamp set, which I know you guys are big fans of, stretching those and getting different looks, but we're also going to be using the same background and just kind of seeing how we can do the background piece a little bit differently to get some different looks as well. We're going to start with the backgrounds and then we're going to do the Copic coloring. The Copic coloring is definitely more of a beginner scale Copic coloring. So if you're new to them, then this will be a good one for you because we're doing more pastels. So I'm not going quite as dark as I would normally since, it's spring. We're doing some spring cards today. So I did stamp, I think I ended up stamping 5 total of those extra pieces. Here, this is the color palette I've chose. It's very spring. It's very like sherbet inspired, if you will. So I have bundled sage, scattered straw, dried marigold, and saltwater taffy. And I'm going to do all of my backgrounds the same. And basically I'm just going to ink blend them. This is really important. I'm using blending brushes because blending brushes give you a lighter blend. You're able to go in much lighter with them. And since I'm letting it fade off to white on both the left and the right hand sides, that's why I chose to use the brushes. So if you're using another tool to do your ink blending, you might just have to be a bit more light-handed to get it to blend out into the white. But the brushes, the blending brushes work great for this. That's why I always use them like to do my skies and stuff. And so I'm going from the green to the yellow to the orange to the pink, up at a diagonal. Now, after I do this color, I'm going to realize that my paper is not A2 sized. I had like some scrap papers that were sitting on my desk and inadvertently I grabbed one of those. So I am going to have to trim it down to make it the correct size before I bring in that saltwater taffy so that I have the ink all the way out to the edges. And so for the first layer, I am going in very, like I said, very light-handed because I want it to blend out to that white. And then once I have it blending out to that white, you're going to see here with the saltwater taffy, I'm going to start going in a little heavier, very much directly in the center of that diagonal line. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. Now, I know we're going to have florals that are going to be covering up some of this, but not all of it. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of a stronger color in the center. I think this one is a great spring set. Honeybee always knocks it out of the park with their sentiments, and this one has some that are more encouragement, some that are, could be used for a sympathy card, some that are more just like the one that I use says, wishing you a special day filled with your favorite things. So just, you could use that for a birthday. One of my favorite ones, and we will use this one today, is he has made everything beautiful in its time, which is a Bible quote, which I just love. Spring is my favorite season. I love, the florals blooming and everything just kind of feels new and like it's a fresh restart. And I love that. So for the second, I did 2 of the first pieces. And then for this piece, I actually did the ink blending right over the stamping. Something to note about that, please make sure your black ink is dry or it will make your colors a bit more muddy. Heat set if necessary. Or you could do the ink blending first and then stamp on it. Either or would be fine. I am a person who is never not going to love the extra shimmer. And so in my backgrounds, I am using just clean water because I'm using Distress Inks. And so I did do some tapping on of the clean water in the background. Then I'm going to add in some Perfect Pearls for some shimmer. And again, these are all optional. I did it on all three of mine because I love it so much. But then I also did like a true white, like an opaque true white. And I did that with my Copic ink. And this is already liquid. You don't need to add anything else to it to help it splatter. I do tend to get my paintbrush a little bit wet beforehand. And then just kind of like wipe off the excess water, just to make sure it's doing what I want it to do. And I'm going to do this on one of the ink blended backgrounds, the one that we just did here, where we ink blended over the top of the stamping. If you don't want the shimmers and the white over your stamping, you can like kind of put your hand there, which is what I did, until the spatters were down to smaller bits, and then I let them go. And then for the third one, I am going to actually do the 3D embossing first. This embossing folder is also part of the new release. It's called Sandy's Garden, and it is so good. It is great. It's just like a bunch of wonderful spring florals. And then I spritzed the back, ran it through, and then once that's embossed, then I will go ahead and add the water and the sparkles and all of the, all that jazz. Same thing that I did to the other ones. And there's just something about that added texture in the background, which is really, really nice. Now we're going to move on to the coloring. So here's something that is just like a little tidbit to share with you. So I started with an R20, an R22, and an R24. You can see pretty quickly that my R24 is very dry. If your markers are looking like this, you need to refill them because it requires you to press harder on the image, which increases the chance that you're going to smear your ink. And also, it's just not going to give you the true pigmentation of the color. So after I did this one flower, I was like, okay, I have to stop. I need to refill this marker. Turns out I actually don't have a refill for an R24. Can you even believe that? I do. And it's one of the first markers I ever bought. But anyway, so when that happens, I have the hex chart, which is from Sandy Allnock, which is great. And it shows you all, it doesn't break them up by families, it breaks them up by color, so you can see the next closest color. And so I'm actually going to switch from an R24 to an R35. The R35 is just slightly more pink, but ultimately nobody's going to notice. And when you'll see with this next one that we do, the color is so close to being that R24 that once we layer the other colors over it, it's not really going to be that noticeable. And they'll still blend out really nicely together because the R24 is, the 4 is very close to a 5. But anywho, so as far as the shadows are going when we're coloring these, I'm only using a 3-color blend. And so I'm going in with my darkest color first and putting that in any of my shadow areas. For me, that means any point that two things are meeting. So like this tulip in particular is drawn from a side view. So where it's coming up from the base, there's definitely going to be shadows. Where one petal lays on top of the other, and they're like, it just, oh, how do I want to put this? Like, even when they're drawn from the side view, it's hard to know, like with that one full petal that is right up front, you still have to add shading to the bottom of that because it swoops down and is connected to then the stem that way. So you want to leave the top kind of nice and light, but you still do want to add your darkest color to them even when you can see almost the full petal. And then this one, like you can kind of see inside, so obviously that will be darker, on the inside. The other thing that's really helpful to know when you're picking blends is how your lightest color will affect your mid-tone. And what I mean by that is your lighter color does bleach out your darker colors. And that's what helps them blend together. For this one, that's drawn as if we were looking directly into the tulip, like it's facing us. The center will be much darker because it's cupped and it's inside, whereas the edges are going to catch all of the light because those are the tippy tops of our petals. And then that's going to help that look more dimensional. For the lilies, for this one, so I did them two different ways. For the lily, for this one, I did all the tulips in like the pink color, and then I did all of the lilies in this orange kind of peachy color. For the other ones, you'll see I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to color them all the same. I'm going to color them to create a visual triangle, and I'm going to let the colors just land in that triangle, and I'm going to incorporate some yellows since we do have that in the background, and obviously the green is represented by the leaves. So just going in with these lilies, there's one that's drawn in a side view. There's a couple more that are a bit more open and full, but they're a little bit tucked behind. So again, we're going to add shadows anywhere they're kind of tucked behind or any petals that are tucked under. When doing more open flowers, you do want to make sure that you're leaving some highlight area on the edges of your petals. And this will create the contrast with the darker shadows that you're putting in for the petals that tuck under. So it helps them kind of pop forward and lifts them up a little bit. There is a little teeny tiny lily that is tucked in back here. And for that one, I'm really only going to use just the two darkest colors because that one's going to get almost no light at all. It's tucked way back in there in the back of our little, I don't even want to call it a bouquet because you can use it either way. It's really more of a swag. But anyway, our arrangement, our floral arrangement, maybe that's the way to go. Maybe that's how we'll call it from now on. So for this one, I didn't really get too much into, I know in the past videos we've talked about like pay attention to the illustration lines and where you should add the shadows. For this one, I didn't really get into that, and it's still beautiful. I'm still happy with the way that my coloring turned out. So don't feel like if you're just starting out and those things, those smaller little lines that are harder to pay attention to, if you're not there yet, it's okay. You can still have a beautifully colored image. I colored all of mine the same. I didn't do one of these more detailed than the other. I just left them nice, and like I feel like we've created, a good bit of dimension. For this one, because I did all the kind of corally pink color and all of the orange, the yellow really you're only going to see in the stamen, and then we're going to move on to the leaves. For the leaves, I did do two different combinations of green, but real talk, y'all, you almost can't even tell the difference. And that's one of the reasons why I always preach you don't need all of the markers. Because you don't need all of the markers. I don't even own all of the markers. And this is my JOB. Like, you don't need all of the markers. So for the greens, I tried as well as I could to kind of match that kind of bundled sage color. So these greens are a bit more muted than I would typically use. But that's good. It's good to play around with different colors. So the first combination is a G46, a YG45, and a G21. Here's where I realized I missed a petal on that little lily, and so I had to go back and get it with the orange. The more I colored it, the easier it was for me to kind of spot those things, and it'll be the same for you. The more practice that you get with an image, the easier it is for you to spot those kind of hidden little tricky areas. But anyway, for the leaves, I did add a little bit of shading to the base as well as the tip, just to help give them a more round appearance. And just like with the flowers, the majority of what we're going to see is the mid-tone. We're going to have a little bit of shadow and a little bit of a highlight, but for the most part, it's going to be that YG45 that we're going to see the most of. The way that this is drawn, there are some white areas in between. Now, you can absolutely leave them white to kind of break up that color. I like to sometimes go in and fill them in green. It just helps it look a little bit fuller. And if you had all these flowers arranged together, like the leaves wouldn't just stop, like they would gather. There would be some spaces, but there would be quite a bit more leaves laying on top of the other. For the second combination, I went with a YG67. The G21 now becomes my mid-tone, and then a very light color, which is a YG61. It is much lighter and it is much more desaturated. So it's not going to be very bright. It's going to definitely be more on the gray side. And like I said, realistically, it's not that big of a difference. I could have probably colored them all the same and nobody would have even noticed. But, you don't know until you try. So I tried something different. It was not as different as it could have been, and that's totally okay. So you could just pick one, whatever you have. Like you could just pick one color combination or the other if you're trying to recreate this one, and both would work just fine. Those in-between sections are what you're going to see me go back in and fill in now. And I'm doing that. Oh no, I'm blending it into this one that's a side view. I did blend my greens into that just a smidge. But I did use my darkest color, which is a YG67, to fill in those gaps. There I accidentally made the mistake of filling in a gap that was actually a stem that I had missed. But that's okay. We're like I said, the more you color it, the more, comfortable that you get with it. But I do like those little white areas filled in green more. This is me going back in, trying to lighten up that stem just a little bit. So that's the whole thing colored. The side pieces that kind of pop up and layer over them, you just color the same way. It's just not going to be, it's much easier to color them when they're kind of singled out, quite honestly. But nothing changes about the shading. You would still add the shading, all the points where they're meeting, and you would still add the shading where one is laying on top of the other. So I'm not going to show you the recoloring of all of those. We're actually going to move on to the one where we did the background blending over the stamping. The reason that is going to make this one different, and I'm coloring the same, for the most part, it's the same, colors. I'm not changing anything based on the color that's behind it. If you are a little bit more heavy-handed, if you're doing this technique and you're more heavy-handed or you have darker colors, it may change the color of your items. But I didn't really find that to be an issue. For the green, that tulip that's like way down in the green, I did choose to do that one yellow just because I knew they wouldn't fight each other. Like the yellow would be okay over the green. And then when I got up in the top, I chose to do that lily, that coral color as well. So that way I wasn't going to be, fighting with that little bit of a stronger background color. But really, I just kind of, like I said, looked for that visual triangle and tried to color them so that all of the colors would be represented. The reason that we're doing this, you could absolutely leave it like this. Okay, you could color this whole image and leave it in the background just the way that it is and have this be your card. You could even add a shadow. I've showed that in other videos. You could even add a shadow behind it to help it kind of pop forward. But I'm using it because those colors are a bit more desaturated with the distress ink behind them. So when I color those other guys that we are going to pop up over top of it, they're going to be brighter and it's going to give us more dimension, not just because of the height difference, but because also of the color difference. The brighter ones will pop forward and the more desaturated ones will be in the background, which is exactly what we want when we're trying to create some dimension. If you haven't checked out the Honeybee release yet, would highly recommend. It's I say that about all of them, but it's true. It's so good. A lot of birthday stuff, which you guys know that I do have a tendency, like birthday cards are one of the only cards that I actually use in my life. So it's good for me to have those on hand. So much good birthday stuff. Dawn Woolslegel, my girlfriend, she has 2 She has one die set, which is great. It's like little milkshakes, and like ice cream cones, and that one's so fun. It's one of the lovely layers that she designed. And then she has another one, that's this adorable little spring bunny, and he has some florals with him. Super, super cute. So if you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend that you do. Plus the design team always knocks it out of the park. So even if you're just looking for inspiration, maybe for something that you already own, you could definitely, look at theirs and be inspired just by what they're making, because they're always fantastic. So here, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to show you the coloring of the entirety of this because we just went over it. But I did just want you to see how I'm creating that visual triangle. So you could see where the yellows create a triangle, the reds create a triangle, and then the oranges will as well. There isn't a way to always have just 3 with the number that we have in there. So sometimes you do have to make like a creative choice. Knowing that I was popping up 2 of the tulips, I knew the orange lily that's way tucked back there, you won't even be able to see it really, because I'm going to pop up the 2 flowers that are next to it. For this one, instead, because I do have yellow flowers, instead of coloring the centers yellow, I chose to go with a brown. This is an E57, and that way it's just going to create some contrast so that the couple of little dots of stamen that you'll see, you'll actually be able to see them. So this is one that I colored the same way, but it is obviously not with the distress ink in the background, but it is definitely with all of the colors. And then I'm going to use this extra area to stamp my sentiments. So one of them is a longer sentiment, one's kind of like shorter and squatter, and then one is a little bit smaller, that says sending you hugs, and that one is the one that I will use where I'm popping up all the different layers, just so that way I'm not competing for space with my sentiment. But yeah, so I hope you guys are having a good week and you're getting ready for Easter. We are as well. We're doing kind of what we did last year, where we're hosting for the Taylor side of the family, and then we're gonna go to my family side for like dessert / coffee / after dinner, just so that we'll get to see everybody in the same day. Here I had to buy, can you guys even believe it? The kitting, remember we talked about the kitting for Cape Cod, ran me through like an entire roll of pixie tape. So I had to get a fresh new roll. And then these are all of the coordinating dies. So I am going to cut all of these out, including their sentiments. You guys know I love the way that they do their sentiment dies because it cuts out all of it, like all the middleman. And then the 2 of the backgrounds we know are pretty similar, where they're just the ink blended background with kind of the splashing. This is one of them. This is going to be our base layer. And so I chose to leave this one fairly large. I just trimmed it down just a little bit so that I could have a white border to tie in my white sentiment. But for popping these up, I'm going to and I actually made a mistake. So something to note about these. The tulip that I just did will do either the red one up top, or it will do the one down at the bottom. And it's the same thing for this yellow one. The yellow one will do the yellow one here, or it will do the yellow one down at the bottom. They're the same. So you can choose kind of what you're popping up. The lilies are not as versatile, but so I have the 2 lilies. I'm actually going to adhere down flat, and yes, you can see that white outline for now. Hang tight. So I'm going to adhere those down flat and just glue them, so that I do have another layer of brightness. And then you guys know I don't love a white outline, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to color these the same colors that we used in the background, to just blend them in. Now you do have to kind of take into account that the colors will be a bit brighter because it's not have that distress ink layer. So in order to combat that, like with my greens, I just went in and went over the same colors with a YG61 because that is a lot more desaturated. But you could also use a light gray to knock that color back as well, depending upon what color you're using. If you're using like greens, purples, blues, you would want to use probably a cool gray. And if you're using oranges, yellows, reds, pinks, you would want to use a warm gray. So anyway, I'm going to do the same thing for the ones that we pop up. I'm just not going to show it to you because I've just shown it to you. Honeybee has really great, these little pop-up circles. So this one is the larger one and it's also the thinner one. I think these are like an eighth or yeah, I think they're an eighth of an inch. And then I'm going to use the same one. This is one I've just trimmed down repeatedly to the size that I need. And I'm going to use that to pop up the sentiment. And then these will just get, the little pull tabs will get pulled off and then they'll get popped up. I did make a mistake. I took the yellow one and adhered it down here at the bottom when I really wanted it up there at the top. So thankfully God was very kind to me and allowed me to peel it up without ripping anything underneath. Thank the Lord. Like I'm realizing it right now, like, oh no. Like that should not be there. So I was able to kind of pick it up and then pick up my little foam piece. I'm praying the whole time, you know how it goes. And then I was able to just, reapply the dot and then move that up. And then I took the time to blend them in. I played around a little bit with my sentiment and then ultimately decided that it kind of looked best snugged up against these two ones that were already popped up. And then we're just going to mount it on some white. So anyway, we're hosting our Easter and then we're going to go to our parents. So we're heading into lots of cooking and cleaning, which, is dread. I love seeing everybody. I just wish I didn't have to, clean a toilet to get everybody together, but such is life. So this one, I did trim off quite a bit more. I trimmed off 1/4 of an inch off each side. You could even trim off more than that, but I wanted to adhere my floral up and down, like straight up and down. And so I really couldn't trim off too much more without running out of background for it to be on. So the first one is kind of stamped at a diagonal so that it follows that same line. This one's going to be straight up and down. And then the next one was actually going to go opposite. So we're going to turn it like counterclockwise. So you have the distress inking going one way and then the floral going the other way. Just some options, different options for you to see different ways that you can do your arrangement and still have a balanced design and make it work. But yeah, so I am making, normally Eric's side of the family does lamb cake. I think we talked about this last year because I made the lamb cake last year. And, but I believe his aunt is going to do the lamb cake this year. Back to the card. So for this one, I am adhering it straight up and down, but also notice that I've turned it around. So what was the bottom is now the top. This works both ways. So because of the way that I drew the florals, you can get different orientations out of them and it will still work, just like it'll work if you want to do a landscape or a horizontal card. It will also fill that space really nicely. So here I'm just taking another little piece of tape and tucking that under the sentiment so that everything is flush. And then here, even though we have the same background, essentially, you can see that they look different. For this one, which is the one that we 3D embossed, I'm using another size of foam circles that they have. These are a bit thicker, though they are smaller. These ones, I think, are the 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to adhere the floral almost like so it creates an X. Not that you see that, when you're looking at the card. But this is just going to offer, a little bit more balance so that there's kind of something in every corner. And then the sentiment is going to go directly in the center to kind of anchor everything. And this one this one's background wasn't trimmed down at all. It's the full A2 size. Now, in this release, as they usually do, Honeybee has another great rhinestone and pearl release. The gems, the rhinestones are Let's Party, and then the pearl stickers are just called Celebration. I decided to use the pearls today, just felt more fitting, and I just used a variety for this one, quite honestly. I just used a variety of colors because I have so much color in my card. I used some yellows, I used some pinks, I used two of the different greens, and just kind of, accented my sentiment and then some of the background. I did realize after I was doing it that I completely forgot to put on my clear shimmer and my white gel pen as I do. So I did have to go back, and for the other ones before I put the rhinestones on, I definitely did shimmer them and put the white details in there. So what were we? Oh, we were talking about the cake. So this year they're making the lamb cake because they're going to his aunt's for dessert. And so I'm going to make carrot cake. So that way we have something. So I did have to find a recipe for that. It's been a long time since I've made carrot cake, but I have my carrots and I am ready to peel and shred like a champ. Hopefully it turns out well. And then this is all 3 of the cards. So same stamp, same background, 3 different looks. I hope that this inspired you, to maybe get out your markers or get out your ink blenders and make some spring cards. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.